indeed is a serious issue, a serious concern. It has potential. Measures are called for. And therefore, it is important for me to remind everyone, wherever you are, to follow all indications that have been provided to us by the medical authorities, and indeed for ourselves here in Kenya, the Ministry of Health, as our lives depend on it. Secondly, our respect and goes out to all the health workers that are indeed in the front line of this battle. But what is really going on with regard to the economic impact? And that was really the question that the MPC members considered. First, we have seen around the world, and in particular in China, factories were shut for an extended period. And as we know, the indicator, the PMI, for February was at an all-time record low of 35.7. Indeed, also the services PMI was also at a record low, 29.6. We also know that supply chains have been broken, disrupted. Thirdly, we have seen the financial markets globally react violently. And this violence has been seen in the huge movements has been seen in the markets. We know that we've hit, for instance, in the large financial markets, we have seen extreme volatility, record high. We've seen the various equity markets drop deep into bear territory. We've seen the yields of the various instruments, indeed, the U.S. Treasury, 10-year U.S. Treasury at an all-time record. Currencies also have moved massively. Incidentally, we did see the British pound at a record low. I mean, it has not been this low in 30 years. These are significant movements that can dislocate the markets and indeed can have significant consequences across the financial network and indeed even to the businesses, regular businesses. We've also seen central banks and other authorities move quickly, but also with appropriate size, massively. Fiscal authorities eventually did move, but markets have not been comforted by those announcements that have taken place. Most recently, we've seen a coordinated movement by the central banks and indeed the authorities in the G20, which was something we had been calling for quite some time. Coordinated action is what our world needs today. Now, true to Churchill's statement, maybe they did move eventually after exhausting all other opportunities, but they are here, and we are pleased that it's time for action. Another indicator, and again, this is talking about the backdrop of the discussions that took place, is the price of oil, which has also has plummeted quite sharply. From our perspective here in Kenya, our benchmark oil, that is now somewhere in the order of $25 per barrel, more than half, or it has fallen more than 50%. It's fallen more than 50% from January. So these are all big changes which now we as the policymakers in Kenya have to deal with. Now, what's the bottom line? First, we haven't hit rock bottom, that we know. But yes, we know now that the world is in recession. We note yesterday the managing director of the IMF did mention in a conference call with the G20 that the outlook for global growth in 2020 is negative, and I quote, "A recession at least as bad as during the global financial crisis or worse," end quote. So we ourselves as policymakers in Kenya, and indeed the MPC, did absorb all this, and consequently the actions looking forward had to be directed to limiting the damage and, if anything, strengthening the economy as we brace for full impact of the effects from the coronavirus pandemic. So we now move to the section of the domestic economy. Clearly, inflation is not a concern anymore. And this, we expect it to decline towards the midpoint of our range, that is somewhere in around 5%. Food inflation, by the way, is expected to come down. There are some key products, tomatoes, for instance, that prices had risen sharply recently, last month, and they have come down this month as well. And also non-food, non-fuel, that remains low and stable. And so we don't expect any, or let's say the concerns about inflation are really low. So the concern is really about output. And the usual considerations of output gaps, etc., these were dominated by the potential shock from the coronavirus. And the impact, of course, as we know, is pushing through all growth drivers. For instance, we know here in Kenya about the shutdown on flights. That has a direct impact on specific sectors. Also, the airports are empty. And we have also seen cancellation of hotel bookings, March through May. So that obviously affects our sectors, tourism, transportation, directly. There's also been limited space in terms of freight because of the lack of flights. And this, as we shut down completely all the flights, international flights, that space will only be on the cargo planes that would probably be put in place, which would require some rearrangement in the way our exports are done. There's also the other side of this, which is the imports from China. And we actually import material from China. And the expectation, of course, is that we could probably redirect some of these imports from other destinations, other sources. But that requires a bit more work in terms of connection, and particularly now when you do not have flights to international destinations, that will be a lot more work, a lot harder. But at the same time, we know that we do not know, maybe a backtrack on that, we do not know how long this crisis will last. So we had to take sort of an educated guess in terms of the recovery. For sure, we know that we are not getting a V-shaped sort of crisis. It will probably be more of an extended U for a few months, and then we'll recover back to more normal, gradually to more normal sort of transactions. So before we had this, we had a baseline scenario with growth at 6.2% for 2020. But clearly that scenario no longer holds. So we then, as one of the projections that were discussed, staff presented projections, 3 scenarios basically. A mild one, moderate, and an extreme scenario, all depending on the the strength or the impact from this coronavirus pandemic. Now, I would want to emphasize that it's not a choice. We do not have three and we have to choose from those three. Pick one. No, it doesn't work that way. Really, it will be determined exogenously. The impact is what will determine, is it a significant impact, extreme, or is it mild? And from our perspective, all we can do as policymakers is policy actions to limit the damage or to minimize the extent to which, let's say, growth will decline, or for that matter, the impact on the population, etc. So, from these scenarios, what was clear, what was evident, or what these scenarios show, is that the coronavirus pandemic will cut our GDP, or GDP in Kenya will be lower, and it could be as low as 3.4%. Now, in the mild scenario, it is we estimated it at 5.7%, but then in the extreme scenario, we estimated it at 3.4%. Now, you can see it's still positive, and basically, the element there relates to a highly diversified economy, both in terms of sectors and also in terms of, let's say, destinations of our markets, also for source of our imports and so forth. So that, in a sense, is what has allowed us to be, would allow us to be this resilient, even in the face of significant declines, as I mentioned just now. The expectation is that will be negative, that the global economy will have a negative growth, so it will contract in 2020. First, policy actions will prioritize containment measures and strengthen the health systems. This, I think, we have seen the Ministry of Health push very hard on this. Second, set of policy actions is to protect affected workers and businesses. And we in the central bank, and the decisions that were taken also move in this direction. They are all part of this. And thirdly, a set of policy actions that will prepare us for the recovery. This cloud will pass, and or this crisis will pass. And we want to, when it's done, we want to recover, but recover strongly. So we need to be ready to be back in full business after that. So those are the three directions of policy. So that's the situation with regards to output. I want to say a few things about the external sector. Clearly, the external sector will be affected. And I think the one thing I would mention is horticulture and flowers. Now, we did look at the exports that through February, and the numbers through February remain strong. But in March, the numbers just crumble. Now, what is more is that the next 10 weeks are normally our top weeks for floriculture, because this is when you have Easter, you have Mother's Day, and we obviously had expected significant sales during this time. But what is clear is that we are at a point where there's hardly any space for exports in the aircrafts, and also we know that in the Netherlands they are destroying a lot of the material that has gotten there already. Really, there are no buyers. So we have a significant problem in terms of the disruption that has taken place in this market. Now, our expectation is that it will come back but it requires some work. And I think this is something that obviously we are concerned about. But at the same time, we are concerned about the workers that have been working on the flower farms, etc. So I think that is really a good, let's say, snapshot as to the stress that some of the sectors are facing. So we have the same problem, or would have the same problems on the horticulture. But also on imports, there'll be a decline of some of the imports for the reasons that I mentioned. But importantly, oil. Oil accounts for 20% of our imports. And as I say, the price has fallen dramatically. The peak was actually something like, for our benchmark oil, Marbon, was $86.8 per barrel back in October 2018. And at end December last year, 2019, it was at $69.9 per barrel. Now, beginning of March, it was at $52.4 a barrel. And now it is at $26.5 a barrel. That was yesterday or the day before. So you can see that there's significant savings that can be obtained, or that the economy can actually have. If 20% of your imports, the price has fallen 50%, that obviously calls for a lot of savings in that. Having done all the calculations, we had the baseline, in the baseline projection that we had earlier, the current account deficit was projected at 4.7% in 2020. And as we have said before, we expect the current account to remain around 5%. That is sort of our medium-term expectation. Current account deficit at around 5%. Now, having done the scenarios and looked again at the mild and moderate and extreme scenario, actually we revised our expectation to somewhere between 4 and 4.9% of GDP. So you can see that there are compensating changes in our balance of payments, and therefore the current account doesn't move significantly, doesn't move dramatically. But there are some important elements in there that we need to watch, one of which is remittances. Remittances very much will depend on the duration of the crisis. I think in the short term, you may not expect much change. But I think as let's say, Kenyans in the diaspora, if let's say the crisis lasts long and they are jobless, or the lockdown effects and things like that, all that obviously may lead to some reductions in remittances. But at this moment, we don't expect that to move significantly. Now, there's also some other new transactions which are in the financial accounts. And again, what happens in the financial accounts, a lot of that depends on the duration of the crisis. And but there are some new elements which I would want to mention. We expect some new flows in the very near term. And these are related to the crisis. And this relates to the, let's say, IFIs, international financial institutions. So, for instance, we are expecting emergency. We've already made a request to the World Bank on emergency support related to the coronavirus that will be directed to the Ministry of Health, the various operations that they are doing in the Ministry of Health. The request has already been sent in, and therefore we expect something in the order of 50 million US dollars in the very near term. We are also working with the IMF for emergency assistance. This is assistance that doesn't have the conditionalities of programs. This is emergency assistance. And and it is directed to emergencies like the one we are looking at, and several countries are already have already indicated their interest, and Kenya has also indicated their interest in this. It may be something in the order of 350 million US dollars, and a lot of this could be directed to budget support. We're also working with the World Bank in the context of their DPO, for additional assistance there, something in the order of 750 million US dollars. So these are all official flows, which will definitely, some of them were not on our radar just at the beginning of this year. But this obviously are coming to support the operations that, the emergency operations that are ongoing, and undoubtedly will also support our reserves and so forth. So I think the point we are making here is that the balance of payments will not move significantly. If anything, we see compensating changes, and that will leave us more or less where we expected to be at the end of 2020. I want to make 3 points with regard to the foreign exchange market and reserves generally. First, we do have adequate reserves. I think we mentioned it. It's mentioned in the press, in the communique that we issued yesterday. The reserves that we have, and US dollars 8,250,000,000, something like a little more than 5 months of import cover, and that is adequate to cover us, and as an adequate buffer against short-term shocks. But of course, we know that we can get even much larger shocks, but we want to make up, and that's one of the reasons why we've always said that we do need insurance, and this is why we have been working with the IMF to put together a precautionary program that would provide us some insurance against extreme shocks. So that's one point. The second point is, obviously, we've seen the financial market, the FX market, the foreign exchange market, has remained fairly balanced. But at the same time, we've seen some volatility in it. For those of you that are watching the markets, you've seen how the dollar has surged against virtually all currencies. And so, yes, we have seen in recent weeks a bit of depreciation of our currency, of the shilling, against the dollar. But there has been other factors that have also driven it. And I think one was a certain fear by dealers, and I would even say misunderstanding by some dealers. I don't know why. In early March, we did make the point, we indicated to banks that I think the point again here is we appealing, aside from the rules, we also appeal to let's say the good ethics, the good sense of ethics of all our players around in all markets, particularly at this time when we at a time of crisis. So those are the points I wanted to make in terms of the foreign exchange market, which we therefore continue to see that it will be stable, and we will continue to act as we have always acted. Our exchange rate policy has not deviated. It's always been a flexible exchange rate regime, but we intervene to minimize volatility. I think 2 other points before I finish, or 2 other areas. I want to say a few things about the banking sector. Now, quickly, the private sector credit growth, private sector credit has grown, or the growth of that has risen to 7.7% in February from 7.1% in December. So again, you're seeing this sort of gradual increase in the pace of private sector credit growth. But looking forward, the impact of the coronavirus, or the pain point, the first one of this will be on personal loans. And I think the objective now for us as policymakers and MPC is to ensure that the asset quality, which will be the first challenge, is we stop it from becoming a liquidity problem. Banks are liquid. There's ample liquidity, overall liquidity, but you could end up getting pockets of tightness or specific institutions or specific areas. And so that's why we need to be sure. We need to ensure that it doesn't become a liquidity problem, either generally, but more specifically in specific points. So going back then to personal loans, which, as you know, account for something like 28% of our value of loans. And the issue there would be if people, let's say, let go, so job losses lead to obviously problems in their repayments, and also it leads to significant anxiety and stress. So the idea is to ensure that it doesn't get to that point. So the MPC's decision, or the decision that the MPC took, have to be seen against the backdrop of decisions taken last week. So we do know, you do know that, or you know that there were decisions that were taken, and the decisions relate to banks providing relief to borrowers on their personal loans based on the individual circumstances arising from the pandemic. And to provide relief on personal loans, banks will review requests from borrowers for extension of their loans for a period of up to 1 year. And borrowers were advised to contact their own respective banks to initiate this process. Now, there was also something else, which is medium-sized enterprises, this is the SMEs, and corporate borrowers were also advised to contact their banks for assessment and restructuring of their own loans based on their respective circumstances arising from the pandemic. So that was, there are a few other measures, but I think I wanted to mention those specific measures. And consequently, the MPC, looking at this, it decided to lower the CBR rate, that is our indicator, to signal lower rates, but particularly on deposit rates, And this will allow to create more room for the banks. But it is also important to appreciate that everybody needs to take, has to take a share. I mean, everybody needs to take a bit of the burden of the crisis. And in this case, depositors will need to accept lower rates, lower deposit rates. Secondly, the MPC lowered the cash reserve ratio by 1 percentage point to release liquidity that will help bridge the gaps that will be created by the restructuring. And this was something in the order of 35 billion shillings. And that will be availed to the banks when they demonstrate what they are doing in terms of restructuring and supporting the borrowers that have been hit by the pandemic. So in that sense, it's not generalized. So we are trying to be as directed as possible, meaning the policy itself is directed to the point of greatest need, not sort of a generalized support on every single point. Another point is that we will work to strengthen liquidity management, we as the central bank, And in this, there are 2 points. The first is the interbank market. We need to look at it again and make sure that this is functioning smoothly, and ensure that it works even better than before. And secondly, from today, we will extend the tenure of our repos from 28 days all the way to 90 days. And that will allow banks, in case of liquidity need, they can bring in, through this repurchase agreement, the repo, they can bring in their T-bills, and we can have a repo agreement for as much as 90 days. Now, obviously, our expectation is that within 90 days, the uncertainties around the coronavirus pandemic begin to clear, and then things will probably begin moving towards where they should be, to the normal points. One last section then before I finish, and this relates to the I should also have said that in addition, we've also seen that banks have been, banks of course support the measures that we announced last week, but they've gone further, and their banks are moving on their own to provide even more relief to some of the noted sectors. For instance, the SMEs, and indeed also personal loans. So those are things that I think you'll see more and more as in the next few days and next few weeks. So the last point relates to the things on the fiscal measures and things related to the government. And the first of this is the pending bills, which we have seen. The payment of pending bills have gone relatively well over the last couple of months. And there's very little pending bills from government. That's the national government. And in the counties, we have seen, of the 47 counties, we've seen 16 have fully paid their pending bills, and 31 still have some pending bills to resolve. So we have actually seen the benefit of this from the perspective of some of the businesses that were owed this money. So that is a significant support, as it were, for our businesses. And then secondly, we expect a fiscal package very soon, targeted and with involvement of the private sector and labor. It is important that that all three parties work together to put forward a strong and targeted fiscal package that will help push us or limit the damage and the cost of the coronavirus. So now I finish. From the perspective of the central bank, we stand ready to ensure the smooth operation of our financial markets and the stability of the banking sector. I'm also reminded that the crisis started in Wuhan in China, and it's interesting to note that today they announced that they will end the lockdown in Wuhan in April 8th. So they're already signaling that the lockdown will be ended. So that's the rainbow. And indeed, in the province of Hubei, the lockdown ends tonight. This is significant. And we are very happy that they've made those steps after what obviously has been a rather tough several weeks. Now, at the same time, it's interesting that the word crisis in Chinese has two characters, and the characters relate to danger and opportunity. So yes, we do see danger in this crisis, but we also see opportunities. we are reminded of our connectedness, our humanity, and we will beat this together as a country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge, Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. And you may have realized that this press briefing is being carried out purely on the web. You're receiving this through various channels, the Central Bank website, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and the different television stations that have picked up this feed that we have. And what we've asked you members of the media to do is send through your questions on the different channels. We have the channels that are open to you. And so, Governor, I want to start giving those questions to you. And I'll start with a question from Fred Aminga of the People Daily. His first question is, looking at other nations already hit by COVID-19 and their economic safeguards, what would it take to bring the benchmark rate to zero? Looking at other nations already hit by COVID-19 and the economic safeguards, what would it take to bring the benchmark rate to zero? That is Fred Aminga from the People Daily.
Thank you, Fred. I don't know what the value would be for bringing the benchmark rate to zero. But I think the point I would make is that maybe you're comparing us with the US and other advanced economies. The question I would have is first look at where the interest rate, the real interest rate would be, right? So as long as we have interest rates, I mean inflation rates around 5%, if you brought it down to about 2%, I mean 7%, that gives you something in the order of 2% real rate. My point is, I don't think that's what we want to do. We have also seen the problems that it has created in the advanced economies, particularly if it lasts for too long. What we are doing, on the other hand, is to move in a measured way, meaning we are taking deliberate measures, but calculated. So these are all calculated risks. We are not going with all our ammunition. Sure, we do have big bazookas, but we don't want to begin by using all our firepower on day one, particularly when we don't know how deep this crisis will be. So I think, Fred, I would emphasize that we are moving ahead in a measured way. This is a measured response. And the next one on deck is, of course, the fiscal side. So let's see. And I think a lot of this should be a lot of the support should be coming from the fiscal measures, which, as I announced, will be revealed shortly.
Next question is from Alex Mwangi, business reporter at NTV. The question is, what do you think are the long-term adjustments that financial policy makers need to make to provide sufficient buffers against pandemics in the future? What do you think are the long-term measures, long-term adjustments that financial policy makers need to make to provide sufficient buffers against pandemics in the future? That's Alex Mwangi, NTV.
I don't know, Alex. I think we could talk about our side, but Alex, your question reminds me of a question that was leveled to a coach of, let's say, a particular football team. I'm not going to mention the football team because I don't know which football team you support. But the point here is the following. I think there are two levels, a bit like we mentioned. The policy response, first and foremost, should be related to the health crisis. And that, I think, is something we need to do better. I don't know how we can do, what measures could be put in terms of limiting the potential transmission in the, very, let's say we do a lot of travel, right? All of us do a lot of travel. And this is how this pandemic is spreading. So one could think about those things, but clearly that's not an area that we have any comparative advantage or any sound ideas about. But I think what we as policymakers on our side, particularly in the central bank, need to do is to understand that shocks will come from other areas. And there was a time when we were all excited about the, let's say, the benefits of globalization, particularly when we realized the savings that various supply chains, and for that matter, even just-in-time delivery of products, right? But we've seen the problems with that. We've seen the risks from that. Today and now, we ask the question, there's some, let's say, important, or should we say critical medical medicine, really, that are provided largely or produced largely in Southeast Asia. And if you do not have the transportation links with them, then you would be in trouble. So I'm just making the point that maybe what we need to do is to think of those extreme scenarios that we had or that we thought about are not that extreme. There are things that can happen. So I think the issue here is how should we strengthen or buttress the existing supply chains, particularly for critical facilities. And I think one of the things that we know, I'm now talking of the banking sector, is those sort of crisis response. One of the things in our business you have is you have a list of your critical suppliers, whatever they are. It could be even IT suppliers and things like that. So maybe that is something we need to come up with, a sense of what are critical needs in a case of an extreme scenario such as this. But I think those are things that we can think a little more, let's say, calmly when the crisis has passed and we have maybe put together our thoughts about the lessons.
There's a series of questions which largely revolve around the same matter. And these questions are by Kefa Mwerere from Citizen, Paul Wafula from the Daily Nation, and I believe David from Bloomberg News. That could be David Habling or the other David from Bloomberg News. And the questions are around the facilities from the World Bank and the IMF, primarily to do with what are the amounts and when can we expect these to be coming in? From Kefa, from Paul, and from David.
Okay, so what I was doing here is signaling that those facilities are coming. I think we'll be having, in the context of the announcements of the fiscal measures, which will happen very shortly, in a matter of days. I think your questions will be answered in the press briefing that will be announcing that. So the details in terms of the amounts and things, I think those will be confirmed in that context. But I have already given you the general numbers. I've also given you the general sense of how quickly this will be coming. We are thinking in a matter of, by end April. So end April, early May is when all this, at different times, of course, will be coming in.
All right, another combined set of questions from Alushula of the Business Daily, again, Paul Wafula from the Daily Nation, and a few others who have, in a sense, asked questions about the transmission of these lower rates to customers. What guarantee do customers have that these lower rates will be transmitted to them, and what happens if banks do not transmit these lower rates to their customers?
I think the point here is you should begin to understand how the financial sector operates, and it takes time to have the transmission from the announcement to the end. But I think the point here is, so to expect it to happen the next day is to misunderstand how businesses work and to misunderstand how the financial sector operates. So this will be gradual. This will be a gradual process. Actually, our estimate is that it takes about 2 months before things begin to be, for us to begin to see that the changes are taking place in the borrowing rates, right? But as I said, this change is also is really targeted on the deposit rates. Because in a sense, that sets a floor on the lending rates. And you could say that that is the cost of funding or the cost of funds. So we need to create more room and also have the depositors take a bit of the cost of the crisis. So that is really how we expect that to unfold going forward.
All right, and that question that the governor has just answered was similar to what was asked by Julian Zamboko of NTV and Dominic Omondi of the Standard, all that to do with the transmission speed and effectiveness of transmission of these lower rates. We have a question including by Victoria Munga, but it's been asked by several other people, which is to do with whether the central bank recommends a total shutdown or a total lockdown, and if the pandemic persists and becomes worse, what then are the options for the central bank?
I think there are two things I've mentioned. First, like we said at the beginning, follow the instructions as provided to us. Follow the instructions as good citizens. It is our civic duty to make sure that we stop this pandemic before it consumes us in the economy and indeed ourselves as a people. So we are completely in the hands of the authorities, the health authorities in this. Let's begin there. But at the same time, we do realize that the financial sector provide critical services. And those are things that, as you can imagine, even in places where they have announced lockdowns, they've indicated that banks and other services need to remain open because it is critical. So I think the point for us is we have been working with the banking sector, sure that they can deal with the crisis as we have it today. And if indeed things get worse, there's also, let's say, they can respond appropriately. I don't want to go through the details, but I think the point I'm making here is that, yes, this should relate to a business continuity sort of scenario, and also a business continuity scenario that is sensitive to the health of the workers, and indeed also the health of the customers when they come to the for services. But beyond that, we are very much in the hands of the competent authorities.
The final question, which is by Otiato Guguyo of the Business Daily. There have also been other questions that sort of revolve around this, are to do with the payment service providers. The specific question from Otiato is, will there be oversight over Safaricom transaction fees now that they have been allowed to transfer up to 300,000 shillings? But there have been related questions to do with the enforcement of these lower transaction fees, and if someone feels either a payment service provider or a bank is still charging fees that are higher than what was announced last week.
I think, well, two things I would say. First, there has always been oversight on our payment providers. We license the payment service providers, and we license them, we approve what they should be doing, so there is oversight. So I don't think, I think the question betrays misunderstanding of how this works. So this is in the Wild West, okay? Maybe, anyway, so it's not the Wild West. That's one. In terms of specific complaints and all that, all payment service providers have a sort of a mechanism, a complaints mechanism. Use that complaints mechanism. If you feel aggrieved and if you feel that something wasn't done according to the as stipulated. So I would encourage you to be that customer that puts forward with evidence of what's going on. But I just fear, I sense some fear and mistrust in that question. And I don't know, I think we should be more trusting. A time to be creating, tilting at windmills. This is a time to focus on the real problems and deal with them.
And ladies and gentlemen, on that very trusting note by Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge of the Central Bank of Kenya, we end our briefing this morning. It's still morning in Nairobi.
It needs to come back to me.
Second.
It needs to come back to me.
Yes.
The camera.
Yes, so we want to end the briefing, but before you go away, there's something very specific that Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge would like to inform us, and we would like to give him back the podium.
All right, so thank you. So just want to remind you of this, There will be sunshine after the rain. All right? And on the back side, so there. Thank you all. Thank you. Okay, good.
I help women find independence by training them in fish farming. It's tough on my back, joints, and can cause headaches. Panadol Extra relieves multiple types of pain. If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
Nimekupatia leo tu. Kama hutalipa, nafunga nyumba.
Whose car is that parked outside?
Hiyo gari ni yangu.
What do you mean?
If you'll not have paid rent by the end of the week, at the end of the month, mnahama.
Kesho ukose. Tutambua.
Roger, get out.
Unajua kuna kama dharau fulani na umeanza. All of a sudden, toka out you go. Wakairo hizi sisi ile siku atilikuwa naambia you are fired na kupiga magoti hapa. Oh, Wakairo usinifute.
Kama 10,000 ni mkono. 200,000 si nitakunyonga.
Now more than ever, you need to be abreast with the daily happenings wherever you are. Get the Daily Nation e-paper with a free COVID-19 newsletter at a special highly discounted rate of Kenya shillings 500 for a period of 1 month. Daily Nation. News anytime, anywhere.
East Africa is transforming. And so are we. We are now more diverse, more visual, more engaging. Grab a copy of the new East African. To subscribe, email subscription@ke.nationmedia.com or ePaper@ke.nationmedia.com.
This is Fact Finder from the BBC. More Africans are going online, but how do they access information with low speeds and internet shutdowns? A Kenyan MP wants to police Facebook and WhatsApp groups due to offensive content online. So, is your phone listening to you? Myth or fact? We'll find out.
Just move into the weekend where there's something for everyone. For relationship, financial, and travel information, grab the Saturday Magazine. For trendy farming practices and the latest in agricultural technology, read Seeds of Gold every Saturday. Get your gossip and entertainment news in The Buzz every Sunday. For updates on lifestyle hacks, read Lifestyle every Sunday. To keep your child entertained, get Young Nation every Sunday, covering your needs.
Akili, 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 akili. Let's chase the germs away. Let's chase the germs away by keeping our hands clean. And when you want to sneeze or when you want to cough, do it in your elbow. Let's practice sneezing into your elbow. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Achoo! Again. Achoo! Yay! You did it!
Kwa nini ulinidanganya ati huyo msichana ananitaka na anitaki?
Niende huko ukiwa mwanaume, umuoneshe wewe ni mwanaume.
Sasa hii nini?
Where's Richard? I just came from a long flight. I don't have all day.
The client has been waiting here for more than an hour now.
The client? I forgot. That is unacceptable. I'm pulling my investments.
I'm just having one of the worst days. First there was some drama in the morning and then someone slashed my tires.
Wherever you are, you can still stay updated daily. Get your favorite paper delivered to you. For home or office delivery, contact us on 0719 038 062 or email subscription@ke.nationmedia.com. Daily Nation, the truth.
When I would try to comb my hair, I would not be able to lift my hand to get the comb to comb my hair.
Breakdown in the normal communications between the nerves and muscles. What causes that?
It's predominantly caused by your body generating abnormal antibodies against its own tissues, what we call autoimmune conditions.
If I try to crouch, I'm unable to lift myself up.
Factors that can worsen MG, fatigue, illness, stress, pregnancy, menstrual periods. What is the connection?
Things that potentially could affect the receptors for the chemical called acetylcholine.
The stigma is there, first of all, is you're lazy or you're pretending.
Akili, 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 akili. Will you wash your hands with me? I want to wash my hands with you. Come on, I will show you what to do. Wash your hands in clean water. Wash your hands, wet them with the water. Wash your hands, now add some soap. Scrub your hands in the soap and water. Scrub above and below between the fingers too. Scrub under your nails and scrub-a-dub-a-doo. Rinse your hands in water. Rinse them clean, rinse away the soap. Dry your hands and go.
Akili, why do we wash our hands?
To wash away the germs.
Akili, what are germs?
They're like tiny little bugs on your hands and they can make you sick.
But I don't see any germs on my hand.
That's because they're so tiny that you can't even see them.
Oh wow! I want to wash the germs away. Will you wash your hands with me, Akili?
Of course! Wash your hands in clean water. Wash your hands, wet them with the water. Wash your hands, now add some soap. Scrub your hands in the soap and water. Scrub above and below between the fingers too. Scrub under your nails and scrub-a-dub-a-doo. Rinse your hands in water. Rinse them clean, rinse away the soap. Dry your hands and go. Great job, Haruma! Can you tell me the 4 things we did to wash our hands?
I can try.
1.
Wash our hands with water.
2.
Put soap on our hands.
3.
Scrub our hands all over.
4.
Rinse our hands clean with water.
Wash your hands, wash the germs away.
Tunaweza saidiana na njia mingi sana kama kukill time. Hawitaki kubo pale kwa nyumba unakuja kwangu tunatafuta charger.
Awiti mwenye aliwatafutia kazi. Nyinyi mkakuwa working class. Wacha niombe Mungu niwafikia.
Yaani uitu pika chakula utomwa na wapi? Sasa zingine behaving miaka yako.
Ningekuwa na behavior kama miaka yangu singekuwa Nairobi. Ningekuwa chakula nalima cassava.
I was busy discussing with the men the way forward of this country. Na wewe hapo unapanua mdomo yako na ewa unavuta bure.
Niweze utulie, nikupake, nikumalizie ama uende.
Hey, Ivan ongeleshanga customers wako?
He, kwani utafanya?
Ati mara tuna save tuende majuu. Ati hizi mradi uko nazo za kifala. Hizo siku ziliisha. Zimelanda.
This is NTV.
Jambo mtazamaji, natumai ubuheri wa afya. Karibu kwenye NTV. Sasa mtazamaji, shukran sana kwa kuchagua kuwa nasi. Ni siku ambayo watu wengi wanajitahidi kuhakikisha kwamba wanadumisha usafi. Ni ulimwengu mzima sasa unajitahidi vilivyo kuhakikisha kwamba unadhibiti au kujaribu kudhibiti kuenea kwa virusi vya corona, na taifa hili halijaachwa nyuma. Kumbuka serikali imeweka mikakati kadha wa kadha kuhakikisha kwamba tunapambana na virusi hivi vya corona, ambapo kufikia sasa kuna visa 16 vya corona humu nchini. Hapo jana kisa kimoja kiliongezeka, ambapo sasa ni visa 16. Ulimwengu mzima mtazamaji, kuna visa 1381,761 na vifo ulimwenguni ni 16,558, na tukiona wale ambao tayari wamepona kutokana na virusi vya corona ni watu 102,429. Na mtazamaji, tunaendelea tukabiliana na virusi hivi. Ni virusi ambavyo vilianza nchini China na sasa vimesambaa katika mataifa mengi humu duniani. Afrika haijaachwa nyuma, mataifa mengi yameathirika pia Afrika. Visa zaidi ya 1,400 barani Afrika, vifo zaidi ya 40 kufikia sasa. Na tunaelekea moja kwa moja Uhispania, ambapo tunaungana na mwanafunzi akiwa Uhispania kule, Moses Kibet, na matueleze tu hali ilivyo kule. Na Moses, sijui kama unanipata vizuri, unieleze tu hali ilivyo huko Uhispania ambapo virusi hivyo vimeathiri idadi kubwa ya watu.
Salama sana na kupata kwa uhakika. Kwa majina ni vile umesema, naitwa Moses Kibet. Mimi ni mwanafunzi hapa Hispania. Nimetoka Italia mwezi uliopita. Wiki iliyopita serikali ya Hispania uliweza kutupea kitu inaitwa lockdown. Kwa kimombo ni kukaa nyumbani. Na tumeweza kukaa nyumbani kwa masiku 10. Jana serikali pia iliweza kutoa ilani ya kwamba itaweza kuongeza masiku mengine 11. Hivyo inamaanisha ni mpaka tarehe 15 hapo Aprili.
Italia imeathirika pakubwa sana na virusi hivyo vya corona. Labda ulipotoka Italia ulijitenga labda kwa wiki 2 kama inavyoagizwa, ili mtu tukujua kama labda ana virusi hivyo, dalili za virusi hivyo, kabla ya serikali kutoa amri ya watu kukaa ndani?
Something interesting is that during that period, in fact, my flight went through Belgium before it came here in Spain. And at that time, there were no screening and there were no any communication asked for those who are flying whether to quarantine themselves or not. So we didn't observe anything because we were not told to do so.
Na ni hatua zipi unachukua ukiwa pale nyumbani kuhakikisha tu virusi hivi hauenezi au labda haupati kutoka maeneo tofauti?
Rudia, sijakupata vizuri.
Nauliza, ukiwa hapo nyumbani unachukua hatua gani kujikinga dhidi ya virusi hivi vya corona?
Kwa sasa tunazingatia usafi. Vile this big organization, that is the World Health Organization, inavyosema, na serikali ya Hispania ya kwamba tuhakikishe ya kwamba tunafanya usafi, ya kwamba tunawe mikono zetu, to avoid that is physical distancing, and also they close almost everything, so the movement of people is quite limited. So that is the reason as to why we are trying to keep clean.
Na hapo ulipo una watu wengine au ni wewe tu hapo ulipo sasa?
Kwa mahali nipo niko peke yangu, sijaweza kupatana na Wakenya, lakini nafanya juhudi kuwapata, lakini najua kwa the mainland that is in Spain, the mainland of Spain actually, there are quite a number of Kenyans there, but here I'm just living with a family here.
Naam, tueleze tu labda hatua gani serikali zinachukua kuhakikisha labda pale unapotoka nje ni nini inazingatiwa? Kuna maduka ambayo yamefunguliwa kufikia sasa?
As we speak now, all non-essential stores have been closed. The one which are operational are just these chemists and supermarkets. So we have that chance to go and buy goods. But the government is so strict, say that if you get out, you must have a reason, a valid reason as to why you are going outside. And along the streets, we were told to keep distance. That is, you should at least be 3 or 2 meters apart. Also in the supermarkets, because I was there over the weekend, they have observed that distance that is like 2 meters between the customers. So, I mean, you are being allowed to go in one at a time.
Na shukran sana Moses Kibet akiwa nchini Hispania. Ni mmoja wa wanafunzi walio katika nchi hiyo, mtazamaji. Na sasa tunaelekea katika kaunti ya Taita Taveta ambapo Bill Otieno yuko tayari kuangazia jinsi ya kutumia vifaa kama vile sanitizer au tusema vieuzi, jinsi ya kutumia gloves, jinsi ya kutumia barakoa, yani mask wakati huu ambapo kuna mchipuko wa virusi vya corona humu nchini. Na Bill Otieno, tueleze ni yapi yanaendelea huko?
Naam, shukran kabisa Nuru. Niko moja kwa moja kutoka katika eneo la Taveta. Taveta ni mita chache tu kutoka mpaka wa Kenya na Tanzania ambapo yuko hapa nyuma yangu. Na kwa sasa tuko hapa tunafuatilia swala hili ambalo watu wamekuwa wakilipigana ama wakilijaribu kulitatua kwa muda mrefu tangu liweze kuibuka swala hili la corona. Na kwa sasa niko na wakazi hapa na ningependa niweze kuwaelewa kuwa zile sanitizers ama zile viua viini ambao wanavyotumia, ambapo pia ukizunguka kila kona ya mji huu unaona kuna vidude ambavyo vimebeba maji ambao wanasema inatumiwa
Na mtazamaji, tuwe radhi katika kuhusiana na uhitilafu ya mitambo hapo. Tutarejea tu kuungana naye Bill Otieno baadaye atueleze tu namna vifaa hivyo vinatumika wakati huo kujikinga na virusi vya corona. Kumbuka kwamba watu wanavitumia huku nje lakini hawajui namna ya kutumia vifaa hivyo. Kila mtu unapomwona ana gloves, mwingine utamuona ana mask ya barakoa, lakini hawaelewi jinsi inavyotumika na inafaa kutumika kwa wakati gani na wakati gani haufai kutumika, na iwapo unahitaji kweli kuvitumia. Na mtazamaji, hii leo tuna swali ambapo tunaangazia tu kuhusiana na corona na bidhaa ambavyo tunatumia katika kuhakikisha kwamba hatupati maambukizi hayo. Ubora wa bidhaa hizo ni zipi? Tunafaa kuangazia mambo gani haswa tunaponunua bidhaa hizi? Gani ni gushi, gani ni halali, gani nzuri ambayo itakusaidia katika kujikinga na virusi hivyo? Lakini swali letu hii leo mtazamaji, je, unabainisha vipi ubora wa vifaa vya kujikinga homa ya corona? Je, unabainisha vipi ubora wa vifaa vya kujikinga homa ya corona? Kama nilivyokueleza tu, utajuaje bidhaa unayonunua ni nzuri, itakukinga, ina viini ambavyo vinahitajika, labda ina kiwango cha kutosha cha kama pombe vile wanavyosema au ethanol, hiyo kiwango ambacho kitakusaidia katika kukinga virusi hivyo unapotumia, kando na kuosha mikono au mbali na kuosha mikono kutumia sabuni. Na katika studio mtazamaji, nina wageni wangu. Wa kwanza kabisa kwa upande wangu wa kwanza kabisa ni Boniface Kamiti, ni meneja wa ulinzi wa mteja CAK, na Bernard Nguyo mkurugenzi wa hakikisho la ubora yani KEBS. Hawa wawili watatusaidia tu kuangazia jinsi bidhaa hizi labda ni halali, gani ni gushi, pia kwa wateja kama atakavyotueleza Boniface. Mteja unamwangalia vipi, atakuwa anaathirika kivipi labda na bidhaa hizi. Nikianza tu moja kwa moja kwa Boniface, unamlinda vipi mteja pale tunapoangazia kwamba bidhaa hizi tayari zinafika sokoni, wananunua na ni bidhaa gushi?
Naweza anza na kazi yetu ya CK. Kazi yetu ni kulinda ushindani wa makampuni haswa ili kuongeza ustawi wa Wakenya. Na tunahakikisha kwamba tunazuia kupotosha mwenendo wa soko. So hivyo ndio tunafanya. Kwa hivyo vile CK imefanya tunafanya uchunguzi katika hizi masoko. Tumeenda kwa masoko, iko afisa wengi wa CAK wako katika kaunti 46 sasa hivi tunavyoongea, wako kwa makaunti wakiangalia mabei. Lakini ningetaka kufafanua kitu moja. Tunaangalia ile kitu naweza ita ugavi ama supply chain. Unajua ugavi ama vile usambazaji wa bidhaa hizi. Na tunahakikisha kwamba, na swali moja tunauliza ni kama mtengenezaji wa sanitizer ama face mask hakuongeza bei ya bidhaa, kwa nini muuzaji ama retailer aongeze bei? So hiyo ndio swali tunauliza, na kazi yetu ni kuhakikisha kwamba ugavi yani supply chain unaendelea vilivyo vile inavyopatikana.
Na Nguyo, kwa ufupi tu tueleze tu labda kazi yenu haswa nini tukilinganisha na bidhaa ambazo wakati huu zinaongezwa bei haswa, au gushi, kuna gushi pale hapa sasa sokoni zinaingia. Kazi yenu haswa ni ipi?
Okay, asante sana. Nashukuru kwa sababu ya hii nafasi. Jambo la kwanza kusema ni kwamba kazi ya Kenya Bureau of Standards ni kusaidia jamii kubuni, kustawisha na kuinua viwango vya ubora wa bidhaa na huduma pia katika nchi. Na tunafanya hivi kwa kutumia mbinu tofauti tofauti. Jambo la kwanza ni kuwa tunahusisha washikadau katika kubuni viwango ambavyo tunajua ya kwamba vitamfaidi mtumizi ama mnunuzi wa bidhaa. Na jambo la pili, tukisha vibuni hivyo viwango na kuzifanya kama sasa viwango vya kitaifa, tunafuatilia katika viwanda, kusaidia viwanda sasa kutengeneza hizo bidhaa kwa njia ambayo inafaa na kuhakikisha kwamba wana utaratibu unaofaa, kuhakikisha kwamba kila wakati wanapotengeneza hizo bidhaa zinakuwa zimeingia katika vile viwango vya kitaifa. Sokoni kazi yetu ni kuwa tuna maofisa ambao wanaenda katika kwenye maduka ya rejareja, na kazi yao hasa ni kuchukua sampuli za zile bidhaa ambazo tayari zimetoka kwenye viwanda na kudhibitisha ama kuhakikisha kwa kupima ikiwa bidhaa hivyo vinaendelea kutengenezwa kwa ile njia ambayo KEBS na manufacturers wamekubaliana kwa ajili ya kudumisha huo ubora wa bidhaa. Kwa hivyo tuna hizo mbinu tatu muhimu ambazo tunajihusisha nacho katika kuhakikishia taifa zile bidhaa zinatumika, ni jinsi gani mwananchi anavyoweza kujua ya kwamba hichi kitu kinanifaa ama hakinifai. Pia tunafanya pia upimaji wa bidhaa katika maabara zetu. Aidha wenyewe tumechukua sampuli kwenye soko ama pia mwenye kutengeneza. Na pia hata watu wengine wananchi wa kawaida mwenye kutaka kujua hiki kitu ambacho ninatumia kinafaa kutumika ama hakifai. Anaweza kutupatia hizo bidhaa, tunapima kwenye maabara zetu na tunamuarifu ya kwamba vinafaa ama vifai kulingana na vile viwango ambavyo vimewekwa.
Umesema kwamba kuna kampuni au kuna ambazo zinatengeneza bidhaa kama hizo. Kuna bidhaa au tuseme vieuzi ambavyo vilipatikana ambavyo ni gushi, bidhaa ambazo tayari zilifika sokoni. Kuna wale ambao Wakenya tayari ambao washanunua bidhaa hizo. Mnachukua hatua gani kuhakikisha kwamba bidhaa kama hizi, kwa sababu umeshasema huwa mnatembea katika kampuni kama hizo kuangazia labda kama wanatengeneza inayostahili ubora wake, mnatumia njia gani kuhakikisha kwamba kampuni kama hizi zingine ambazo zinatengeneza bidhaa gushi bidhaa hizo hazifiki sokoni, kwa sababu tayari ikifika kuna makosa mahali ama kuna kasoro mahali?
Okay, kwanza niseme ya kwamba kuna sheria ambayo mtu anafaa kufuata kabla kuweka bidhaa yoyote kwenye soko. Na hiyo sheria kwa kifupi inaitwa Standards Act. Na hiyo ndio sheria ambayo Kenya Bureau of Standards imewekwa kwa ajili ya kutekeleza. Sasa kwa mujibu wa hiyo sheria, kabla ya mtu kutengeneza bidhaa yoyote ambayo anauza, lazima anotify ama aandike kwa haraka kwa Kenya Bureau of Standards kutuarifu ya kwamba anakusudia kutengeneza bidhaa hii. Tuchukue kwa mfano sanitizers, kwa sababu saa hizi ndizo ambazo ni mada muhimu kwetu. Kama kuna mtu anakusudia, ameona ya kwamba kuna soko ya sanitizer, jambo analofaa kulifuatilia ni kwamba kwanza atuandikie ama atuarifu kwa njia yoyote ana nia ya kutengeneza hizi bidhaa. Tutahakikisha ya kwamba jambo la kwanza anajua viwango vya bidhaa kulingana na ile sheria ambayo imewekwa. Pia tutamtembelea kwenye kiwanda chake kuhakikisha ya kwamba pia sio tu ya kwamba ana nia ya kutengeneza, ana vifaa vya kufaa vinavyofaa kutengeneza hiyo bidhaa. Sasa changamoto ambayo tumepata katika muda huu ni kwamba watu wengi wamepata kuona ya kwamba kuna soko, maana mahitaji ya vitu kama sanitizer yamekuwa nyingi. Na wao jambo walilofanya, badala ya kufuatilia huo mpangilio ambao utawezesha serikali kujua ni wapi unatengeneza na ikusaidie ili ya kwamba utengeneze ile bidhaa ambayo inafaa kwa ile njia inayofaa, wamekuchanganya tu vitu na kupeleka kwenye soko. Sasa ndio unaona nikasema jambo la mbinu ya tatu ambayo tunatumia ni katika soko kutuma vikundi vya maofisa kuangalia ni bidhaa gani zinauzwa na kujaribu kuhakikisha kana kwamba hizo bidhaa zimeidhinishwa kuwa huko kwenye hiyo soko kulingana na quality ama kulingana na kiwango chake cha ubora. Sasa pale ambako tunapata ya kwamba hazina viwango vya kutosha ama havija kutengenezwa kwa mujibu wa unaofaa, hizo bidhaa ndizo tunatoa kwa soko na tunawaarifu wananchi ya kwamba hizi bidhaa hatujazidhibitisha, kwa hivyo hatuwezi tukaeleza ya kana kwamba ni nzuri ama ni mbaya kwao.
Na shukrani sana mtazamaji, tunaendelea tu kujadili swala hili kuhusiana na bidhaa, ubora wa vifaa hizo sokoni, haswa ukiangazia swala la bidhaa gushi kama vieuzi au ukipenda sanitizers ambao sasa watu wengi wanahitaji, lakini kuna gushi ambazo tayari zimefika sokoni, lakini kwa uwezo tu wa KEBS kuna baadhi ambayo tayari yameshatajwa, na kwa kuwa Mkenya tuwe tu waangalifu, tuweze kuangazia ni yapi ambayo tunafaa kujua, mbinu gani ya kutumia ili kuhakikisha kwamba tunajua bidhaa hizi gushi. Kuhusiana na hayo mtazamaji, tutarejea tu baada ya muda usiokuwa mrefu kukueleza tu ni vipi utakavyojua bidhaa gushi na bidhaa ambayo unafaa kutumia na ni bora kwa usalama wako pia.
Japo njia bora zaidi ya kuhakikisha usafi wa mikono ni kutumia maji na sabuni, katika baadhi ya sehemu wameweka mchanganyiko huu maalum wa kutoa uchafu maarufu sanitizer, na tunahimizwa kila tunapotumia tuhakikishe kwamba sehemu zote za mkono zimeupata mchanganyiko huo kwa kufanya hivi kwa takriban sekunde 20 hivi, na tuhimizane wenyewe kwa wenyewe kufanya usafi, manake wapo mwenzako hatafanya usafi basi anakutia wewe hatarini.
It's my summer, got my squad, we go harder, we got a little bit of feel good now.
Working from home? No problem. Fiber Home has you covered with the fastest and most reliable internet speeds. Get connected today. Kazi lazima iendelee.
To achieve great things in life, you must do little things every day, like the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate.
1, wake up, wake up. 2, brush up, brush up. 3, smile through your day with a fresh breath and strong tea. Smile through your day with a fresh breath and strong tea.
3 with Colgate and give yourself a future to smell about.
Hanging out, it's my summer, got my squad, we go harder, we got a little bit of feel good now.
Basic protective measures as guided by the World Health Organization. Clean hands frequently with soap and clean water. Cover nose and mouth when coughing and sneezing with a tissue or flexed elbow. Avoid close contact 1 meter or 3 feet with anyone with cold or flu-like symptoms. If you have fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical care early. Avoid raw or uncooked animal products. Help the world put an end to the spread of respiratory diseases by sharing this message with a friend. Message brought to you by Sour Herbal Family Bath Soap.
God, where are you?
I knew you were trying to shove that God stuff down my throat. I'm telling you, there is no God. I was champion of the world twice. I was somebody. Then God took it all away. God, doesn't he control everything? He let Hector die. He let them strip me of my title and everything that I had.
This panel has voted unanimously to permanently revoke your license to box in the state of Florida. We will make that recommendation to our national organization as well.
And you think God did this to you? You think God abandoned you? You think God planned all this to harm you?
God, where are you? Where are you?
Heaviness and a burning inside, it could be heartburn.
Indigestion and heartburn? Eno gets to work in 6 seconds and works on the 6 symptoms of heartburn so you can keep living life non-stop. Eno, fight heartburn and indigestion fast.
It feels good, Coca-Cola and food Monday to Sunday. We're all chasing taste. Let's just grab a bite and enjoy, drink a Coca-Cola every single day. So we feel forever be real, together stay free wherever at. No, we can't stop, we wanna taste the feeling. Nothing can ever bring us down. Taste the feeling.
Now more than ever, you need to be abreast with the daily happenings wherever you are. Get the Daily Nation e-paper with a free COVID-19 newsletter at a special highly discounted rate of Kenya shillings 500 for a period of 1 month. Daily Nation. News anytime, anywhere.
Kwa nini ulinidanganya ati huyo msichana ananitaka na anitaki? Niende huko ukiwa mwanaume, umuoneshe wewe ni mwanaume.
Sasa hii nini? Where's Richard? I just came from a long flight. I don't have all day.
The client has been waiting here for more than an hour now.
The client? I forgot. That is unacceptable. I'm pulling my investments.
I'm just having one of the worst days. Plus there was some drama in the morning and then someone slashed my tires.
One, two, three, get it. Where the B-boys at?
Naam, karibu tena mtazamaji na shukran sana kwa kuendelea nasi. Iwapo unaungana nasi, unatazama NTV sasa na tunaangazia swala la virusi vya korona, haswa tukiangazia bidhaa ambazo tunahitaji kutumia wakati huu kujikinga na kuenea kwa virusi vya korona. Naam, lakini tukielekea kaunti ya Kisumu, tunaungana naye Zaccheus Mosame ambaye amehudhuria kikao na familia ya kasisi ambaye ameathirika na virusi vya korona. Wametoa tu taarifa kuhusiana na kisa hicho, na Mosame alihudhuria kikao hicho na anatueleza tu ni yapi yamesemwa. Na Mosame, tueleze tu.
Shukran sana Nuru, tunakujia moja kwa moja kutoka hapa katika kaunti ya Kisumu. Awali tulikuwa katika kikao na mmojawapo wanafamilia wa Padri Richard Oduor aliyeweza kwenda majuzi, akaenda kule katika kijiji cha Ambira, kaunti ya Siaya, alikuweza kusimamia mazishi ya mwenda zake, na hapo mamia ama maelfu ya waombolezaji walikuwepo, na hilo basi limezua tahadhari kwamba huenda wale waliohudhuria wakaweza kupata virusi vya korona. Lakini hapa Kisumu tumekuwa na kikao na mmoja wa wanafamilia. Yeye hakuenda kule, lakini anasema nyanya yake pamoja na Ami waliweza kuhudhuria mazishi hayo, na hata katika zile picha ambazo zimekuwa zikisambaa katika mitandao ya WhatsApp ameweza kumuona Ami yake akiwa kwa karibu sana na Padri Richard, na hilo limemtia wasiwasi, na akaweza kuitisha kikao na wanahabari ili kutoa taarifa kwamba wasidhubutu kurejea nyumbani kuweza kuweka maisha yake pamoja na familia wengine katika hatari, ila amewaomba kupitia vyombo vya habari iwapo wanapata taarifa hiyo kwamba nyanya yake pamoja na Ami waweze kusalia mahali walipo, ili siku zitakapokamilika 14 wakipima wakidhibitishwa kwamba hawana virusi vya korona, basi ndipo waweze kurejea. Na yeye vile vile ameweza kutoa msimamo wake akisema hiyo inafaa lichukuliwe na kila Mkenya ambaye anajishuku kwa vyovyote vile. Amesema vile vile kwamba kila Mkenya aweze kuchukua tahadhari, na labda kuweza Nuru kusikiza alivyoweza kuyasema, naomba basi kumpisha Lawrence Okoth jinsi alivyokuwa akisema hapo awali katika kikao na wanahabari hapa.
Kwa hii matanga yenye huu padri alikuwa, huu father, baba yangu alikuwa kwa hiyo matanga, nyanya yangu alikuwa kwa hiyo matanga, na uko wetu walikuwa kwa hiyo matanga, kwa sababu huyo mama ya huyo mwenye alikuwa nazekwa alitoka huko kwetu. Sasa mimi nimekuja hapa, nilikuwa nataka hao watu waende wapimwe na waanze na baba yangu, kwa maana kwa WhatsApp nikiangalia napata kama baba yangu alikuwa karibu sana na huyu father, na yeye lazima akikuanga karibu na father, yeye lazima salimie father, kwa sababu ni mtu strong kwa Catholic, lazima asalimie father. Sasa nilikuwa nataka achukuliwe aende apimwe, kwa sababu yeye ni mtu hawezi wekwa kwa nyumba, hakuna mtu hawezi weka yeye kwa nyumba. Sasa kama hao wanaweza enda waende wachukue yeye, wapime yeye, waweke yeye mahali, wangoje waangalie kama anaweza kuwa amepata hii ugonjwa hata kama ako clean.
Basi ni hisia zake Lawrence Okoth, anayesema sharti waliohusika katika, na hajasema wanafamilia wake pekee, amesema waumini wote waliokuwa katika yale mazishi waweze kupima. Anasema ni idadi kubwa, kwa hiyo serikali lazima ifanye hima kuweza kuwafikia wale wote waliohusika katika mazishi haya. Kwa hiyo Nuru, vile vile tumeweza kupata taarifa kutoka kijiji cha Ambira kwamba kuna hali ya wasiwasi, lakini wenyeji pale wanasema wanachukua tahadhari kuhakikisha kwamba wanaweza kufuatilia mwongozo uliopo ili kuweza kuepusha na maradhi haya ya virusi vya korona endapo vitakuwa katika eneo hilo. Kwa hiyo tutazidi kuweka macho yetu kufuatilia hili kwa karibu sana, na tutaweza kukupasha katika taarifa zetu za hapo baadaye. Kutoka hapa Kisumu, mimi ni Zaccheus Mosame, na sasa nakurejesha kwako Nuru.
Na mshukran sana Mosame, mtazamaji. Na sasa tunaelekea Taita Taveta, tunarejea tu kwa Bill Otieno ambaye ana madaktari au wahudumu wa afya ambao watatueleza tu jinsi ya kutumia vifaa hivi kama vile barakoa au tuseme mask ama gloves pale tunapojikinga na virusi hivi. Na Bill Otieno. Na tunaelezwa bado kuna tatizo la kuna hitilafu ya mitambo, na mtazamaji, tutaendelea tu na mjadala wetu hii leo, lakini kwanza kabisa nitakufahamisha tu swali letu la leo, ama nitarejea swali letu la leo. Je, unabainisha vipi ubora wa vifaa vya kujikinga homa ya corona? Je, unabainisha vipi ubora wa vifaa vya kujikinga homa ya corona? Wasiliana nasi at NTV sasa @Nuru_Abdulaziz. Na mtukielekea kamiti, ningependa tu nieleze saa hizi tunaona kwamba wateja au Wakenya tu wanapoenda dukani kununua vifaa kama hivi, tuseme barakoa hivi, ama tuseme vieuzi, sanitizers ama gloves, bei tunaona kwamba wengi wameongeza bei. Tunakisha nini? Kwa sababu umesema mnatumia njia kuangazia yule ambaye analeta bidhaa hiyo ili kuweza kununua, bei yake iko vipi? Mnamkinga vipi au mnamzuia vipi mtu kama huyo kuongeza bei kufikia sasa? Kuna wakati ambapo mlitaja duka fulani ambayo ilikuwa imeongeza bei na mkasema kwamba warejeshe walionunua bidhaa hizo pesa ambazo walitumia kwa juu, kuongezea juu. Na ni hatua gani kando na hiyo ambayo mnatumia?
Kando na hiyo tumeandikia karibu makampuni 100, hata kupita 100, tukawaandikia mabarua na wanatupatia mabei zao vile wanauza vitu zao. Na vile kama awali nilikuwa nimeeleza kwamba afisa wetu wako chini, wako kwa county sasa hivi tukiongea, na wanaongea na wauzaji wa hizi bidhaa kama ni pharmacies ama kama ni supermarkets, na kuangalia bidhaa vile zinauzwa. Lakini ningetaka pia kufafanua kwamba kazi ya CIK sio kuambia muuzaji vile atauza hiyo bidhaa yake. Kazi yetu ni kuhakikisha kwamba ugavi ama ile supply chain ama usambazaji wa bidhaa hizi na kuhakikisha bidhaa hizi zinafikia mnunuzi. Na tungetaka kupongeza watengenezaji wa bidhaa muhimu kama mafuta kama hii ya kupikia ama bidhaa hizi zingine za kukula. Hawajaongeza bei, na tumekuwa tukiona hata kwa soko bei hizi za hizi vitu kama hazijaongezwa. Lakini mambo ya sanitizers ndio tunaangalia supply chain na kuhakikisha kwamba ni bei gani mtengenezaji alinunua nayo na ni bei gani aliuzia retailer, na huyu muuzaji pia anauza na bei gani. Tunahakikisha ndio tunaingililia hapo, ndio tunahakikisha kwamba mnunuzi wa sanitizer ama masks amesaidika. But hata tunaona serikali imeingililia maneno na hivi juzi ulisikia pia serikali ilisema ethanol iwachiliwe. Na tutaona hata bei ya hizi sanitizers zitaenda zikianguka.
Na ukiangalia tu labda swala hilo la bei, kuna Wakenya ambao sijui kama inakuhusu, lakini labda unieleze tu. Kuna Wakenya ambao sasa wanaelekea madukani kwa sababu wanasema ikifika wakati fulani labda bei itaongezeka baadaye, labda wakati maybe tutazuiwa, kama kuna uwezekano wa kuzuiwa kutoka nje. Kuna Wakenya ambao wamejitokeza wengi kununua kwa wingi ili kuhakikisha kwamba wana stock nyumbani, ndio wasiweze wakashindwa wakiwa pale nyumbani, waweze kujimudu, wawe na chakula ya kutosha. Mnahusika vipi katika hii?
Tumeshirikiana na watengenezaji wa bidhaa hizi na retailers, wauzaji wa bidhaa hizi, na wametuhakikishia kwamba bidhaa zitapatikana kwa maduka, bidhaa zitapatikana kwa supermarkets. Kwa hivyo Wakenya tunataka kuwatia moyo na kuwaambia kwamba wasinunue bidhaa hizi kwa hofu, yani panic buying. Wasinunue hizi bidhaa kwa hofu, kwa sababu bidhaa hizi zitapatikana kwa maduka. Tumeshirikiana nao, ndio tunataka kuwapongeza kuwapongeza kwa kushirikiana na Competition Authority of Kenya kuhakikisha bidhaa hizi zitafikia kila mwananchi. Ndio nilikuwa nasema hiyo supply chain ama ugavi ndio tunahakikisha tunaangalia, ndio bidhaa hizi zifikie mwananchi.
Naam, Nguyo, nilikuwa nimeshamwaahidi mtazamaji kwamba utatueleza ni vipi mimi naenda pale dukani nafaa kununua bidhaa hiyo muhimu kwa wakati huu ambapo tunafaa kuhakikisha kwamba tunapambana na virusi hivyo. Nataka kununua vieuzi au sanitizer. Nitajuaje hii ni halali, itanisaidia, sio gushi pale sokoni? Natumia hatua gani labda?
Okay, nashukuru kwa sababu ya hilo swali. Kenya Bureau of Standards kuna mpangilio tulianzia about 3 years ago unaitwa wajibika na KEBS. Na huo utaratibu ni kumhusisha mnunuzi ama kuwahusisha wananchi katika kusaidia serikali kuondoa bidhaa ambazo hazina viwango bora kwenye soko. Na kwa huo utaratibu tumeweka njia tofauti ambazo mwananchi ama mnunuzi anaweza akatumia ili kubainisha ya kwamba kile kitu ambacho naenda kukinunua ni sawa. Na sio tu mnunuzi, hata wale ambao wanaweka hizo bidhaa katika maduka yao, wakiletewa pengine na wale wafanyabiashara wakuu, wakiletewa na wale ambao wanazitengeneza, kuna njia ya kuhakikisha kwamba hiki kitu ambacho ninakipokea kukiweka kwa ajili ya watu kununua ni kizuri ama sio kizuri, ama kinafaa katika kulingana na viwango vya Kenya. Sasa zile njia ambazo tumetengeneza nataka kuhusia 2 ambazo ni muhimu. Njia ya kwanza ni inatumika na wale watu ambao wana simu za mkono ambazo zina uwezo wa kwenda kwa internet. Na aidha iwe ni iPhone ama iwe ni Android, tumeweka app inaitwa KEBS. Na hiyo app inasaidia kujua ni huduma gani ambazo unaweza ukapokea kutoka kwa Kenya Bureau of Standards. Nitagulia na kusema ya kwamba ukitengeneza bidhaa kwa utaratibu unaofaa, KEBS inakupatia idhini ya kutumia alama ama nembo ya KEBS. Na hii ni kwa mujibu wa sheria.
Lakini kwanza kukatiza tu kidogo. Kuna bidhaa ambazo tunapata kule nje zimeandikwa KEBS, lakini baadaye unaona kwamba KEBS wakija kufanya labda uchunguzi wao wanapata bidhaa yenyewe ni gushi. KEBS hiyo, mbona tunatumia njia gani kando na kuangalia KEBS? Kwa sababu KEBS tayari watu wengi wao wanasema ndio utapata bidhaa imeandikwa KEBS, lakini sio nzuri au ni gushi.
Asante, kwa maana hapo ndipo ninaelekea. Kitu cha kwanza ni kwamba haufai kuweka bidhaa katika soko bila kufuatia huo utaratibu ambao unapewa sasa kisheria ruhusa ya kuweka hiyo nembo ya KEBS. Ukishapatiwa hiyo ruhusa, kitu ambacho utapata kwa nembo ya KEBS ni kwamba kuna namba.
Tuone vizuri.
Kuna namba. Nilichukua hizi tu kwa maana hizo ndizo zilikuwa karibu. Kuna namba ambayo unapatiwa permit number. Ukiona hiyo nembo ya KEBS, kuna namba utaona hapo. Chini yake imeandikwa SM, halafu hash, halafu namba fulani. Sasa kama unataka kuhakikisha ya kwamba hii bidhaa ambayo ninanunua imethibitishwa na Kenya Bureau of Standards, ukiwa una simu ambayo inaweza kudownload apps, kuna hiyo app ya Kenya ya KEBS, naweza nikaonyesha kwa haraka. Na hiyo apps inakupatia nafasi ya kuweka hiyo namba.
Tuonyeshe kwa kamera vizuri.
Okay, acha nirudi. Hii ndio app ya Kenya Bureau of Standards ambayo utaipata kwa either Google Play, Play Store or App Store. Ukidownload sasa, ukitaka kuhakikisha hii mark ya kama ni sawa, unabonyeza hapo. Halafu hapa juu verify certified product, pia unabonyeza. Inakupatia nafasi ya kuweka hiyo namba. Ukiweka namba, nichukue hii namba ambayo niko nayo hapa mbele yangu, 41 549. Itakuwa unabonyeza verify. Sasa itakupatia details ya hiyo bidhaa ambayo unanunua, na unaona ni haraka sana. Ni kitu unafanya tu kwa shelf. Unahakikisha kama iko sawa kabla ya kununua. Unahakikisha kama iko sawa, itakwambia ni bidhaa gani. Hapa inaandikwa hand sanitizer. Itakupatia jina la ambaye ametengeneza hiyo bidhaa, na itakupatia siku ambayo aliidhinishwa kutengeneza, na siku ambayo hiyo permit itaisha, ita expire. Ukiona hayo maandishi yanalingana na ile bidhaa unachukua, unajua hiyo ni bidhaa halali. Kama hiyo bidhaa sio halali, utapatiwa ujumbe tofauti, na huo ujumbe utakwambia kwamba hiyo bidhaa unanunua haipatikani kwa database ya KEBS. Sasa kutoka hapo, kama wewe ni mnunuzi, unaweza ukatuma ujumbe kwa Kenya Bureau of Standards, ama ukapiga toll free number 1545. Ukipiga hiyo namba ni toll free, haina malipo. Kuna mtu atabaye atachukua details za hiyo bidhaa ambayo unanunua mahali pale, na tutafuatilia sasa kwa yule mwenye duka na kwenye kutengeneza. Lakini sio watu wote ambao wako na simu za aina hiyo, kwa sababu huko vijijini pengine watu hawana simu ambazo zina uwezo wa kudownload apps. Njia badala ambayo tumefanya, unaenda kwa SMS. SMS ya kawaida, alafu hapa juu unaandika 223. Hiyo ni kodi ambayo tutatuma kwa ile message. 223. Hapo chini utaandika hiyo namba, lakini hapa inafaa uandike namba yote kamili. Kama ni SM, uandike SM hash, halafu namba. Acha nichukue nyingine nisionekane kana nina ubaguzi.
Nataka tujaribu na tofauti ambayo labda itakuwa ni gushi, itakuwa bora zaidi.
Sasa tuseme for example, namba hiyo pengine nikadirie tu namba. Niseme pengine namba 26700 hivyo. Hiyo ni namba ya kubuni tu. Nikituma huo ujumbe, itanipatia ujumbe.
Shikilia tu hapo.
Na ujumbe mwenyewe ni sorry, ujumbe mwenyewe ni sorry, query not found. So inakwambia utume message help kwa 223 ama upige toll free number 1545. Sasa ujieleze ni wapi unanunua na ni bidhaa gani ulikuwa unanunua, na kutoka hapo Kenya Bureau of Standards tunachukulia hilo jambo na kufuatilia na wale ambao wameiweka hiyo bidhaa kwa soko. Hizo ndizo njia mbili ambazo tumeweka, ambazo mtu anaweza akatumia ili apate kubainisha kabla ya kununua bidhaa yoyote ya kwamba hiyo bidhaa ni bidhaa ambayo imehakikishiwa ubora wake kulingana na mujibu wa sheria na Kenya Bureau of Standards.
Kwa hivyo kuna wale ambao wananunua bidhaa hii kama hivyo, kuna yule mnunuzi ambaye ananunua kwa kiwango kidogo, labda moja tu mbili ya kutumia nyumbani kwa matumizi ya nyumbani. Kama mask ikija kwa package labda inakuja na namba labda USM namba ama, lakini nikitaka kununua moja nataka kujua hii ni nzuri nafaa kutumia, itakuwaje? Nadhani itakuwa tatizo kidogo.
Okay. Unajua kuna bidhaa zingine ambazo hata katika mahali ambako unauza kwa rejareja hufai kuondoa kwa mfuko wake. Maana kama bidhaa ni hygienic ama ni bidhaa za kuhakikisha usafi.
Na sasa watauza rejareja sana.
Wala sasa hiyo mambo ambayo tunasema ya kwamba ni kufanya biashara kwa njia ambayo haumjali mwenzako. Kitu cha kwanza ambacho ningependa kuhakikishia wananchi, sanitizer tumesikia sana watu wengi wamesikia kwa wakati huu. Hata vijijini pengine mama yangu hajui sanitizer ni nini. Kuna njia ambazo serikali imetupatia za kuhakikisha kwamba tumejikinga na haya maradhi. Jambo la kwanza ni usafi wa mikono. Na kitu cha kwanza hata kulingana na ile standard ambayo imedhibitisha hizi bidhaa, tunasema sanitizer inafaa kutumika mahali ambako hakuna maji. Jambo muhimu ni kwamba hifadhi usafi kwa kuosha mikono na maji na sabuni. Ndio sanitizer inakuwa ni njia badala. Kama pengine hauna maji safi na hauna sabuni. Kwa maana jambo moja ambalo hawa watu wafanya biashara guzi wanatumia ni hii hali watu kufikiria kwamba lazima niwe na sanitizer. Nisipokuwa na sanitizer siwezi kaishi.
Hata nikiwa nyumbani lazima tu nitumie sanitizer pia.
Na una maji mingi, una sabuni. Hiyo ndio njia muhimu sana kutumia, kuosha mikono yako na maji na sabuni. Ndio sanitizer itumike, ama mask tumeshauriwa tayari pengine hizo zinafaa kutumika na watu fulani. Kwa hivyo hakuna haja ya kukibiria utoe moja ati ujifunika wakati huo, na ukishaiguza pengine uitoe uguse uso wako tena, kazi yake imeisha. Njia za kujikinga tumepatiwa. Masks zitumike na wale watu ambao tumeambiwa wanafaa kutumia masks. Sisi wengine tutumie njia ambazo tuhifadhi usafi wetu, social distancing na mambo kama hayo. Ndio hii panic buying, na unakuta watu wanaweka bidhaa katika soko waki-exploit hiyo panic buying ipungue, maana tunajua wakati gani nahitaji sanitizer ni wakati gani sihitaji sanitizer.
Naam, shukrani sana. Naam, Kamiti, tukimalizia tu kwa sababu hatuna muda kwa sasa, nieleze tu labda mnaangazia swala la kuficha bidhaa au hoarding kwa wauzaji?
Ndio, tunaangazia swala hiyo ya uhodhi wa bidhaa. Na bila nilikuwa nimesema awali, ni ofisa wetu pia, bali ya kuangalia mabei, tunaangalia mambo ya uhodhi wa bidhaa. Ndio.
Okay. Na shukran sana mtazamaji, ni hayo tu kwa sasa. Shukran sana wageni wetu na Boniface Kamiti na Bernard Nguyo. Natumai kwamba mtazamaji umeweza kuelewa jinsi ya kuweza kujua bidhaa ambayo unatumia si gushi na ni bidhaa muhimu kwa sasa kutumika, na haswa kama alivyokueleza Nguyo ni kwamba sio lazima sanitizer au viuzi kutumiwa kila wakati. Unapokuwa nyumbani ni vyema tu kutumia maji na sabuni. Kama hauna maji na sabuni na uko nje, pia ni bora zaidi kuwa na vieuzi hivi. Lakini kabla sijaondoka tu kuna swali moja Kamiti, wacha na mwelekezi wangu ananifukuza katika studio. Na mtazamaji, ni hayo tu kwa wale ambao wanatengeneza nyumbani. Nguyo awali alinieleza kwamba kuna vigezo ambavyo unafaa kuangazia wakati unatengeneza vitu kama hivyo nyumbani. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri tu kuangazia bidhaa ambayo tayari imetengenezwa na ambayo imedhinishwa na KEBS ili kuweza kutumia na kusaidika wakati huu wa kuenea kwa virusi vya corona. Mtazamaji, tutilie maanani tulichoelezwa na tudumishe usafi. Ni hayo tu kwa sasa. Taarifa za mwendo wa saa 7 kamili na yanajiri hivi sasa.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. Dentists recommend Sensodyne to their patients. It's able to get inside the tooth and calm the nerve of the tooth down. And the proof's in the results. It works.
As a news director, you also need to put a lot of consideration when it comes to preventing the spread of the coronavirus, especially here in the all right. Yes, and I think that's what I learned. When you do get a sneeze or you feel like coughing, take a tissue paper, put it on your mouth and in front of your nose and sneeze into it, then roll it down and throw it in a trash can.
I'm withdrawing from Paraíso. My decision is final. I advise you to do the same. Manuel.
Dad had another job? Look at the date. That's the day of my father's death.
Are you implying that I had something to do with your father's suicide, Samuel?
Your beloved Paraíso's about to fall.
One bullet is all it takes to finish him off.
A man like Fabian doesn't even deserve death. I'll persecute him without end until he could no longer stand it, and that's what I'm going to tell him. It's his own flesh and blood who will destroy Paraíso. If you want your son to get through this alive, you'd better not tell anyone about what happened. Especially to the cops. Is that clear?
You bunch of animals!
Sonadol Extra imetengenezwa kwa njia spesheli kupambana haraka na maumivu ya kichwa, mwili na hata meno. Sonadol Extra, hakika maumivu yakizidi, pata ushauri wa daktari.
When you're facing stubborn stains, you're always in a fierce fight. Clean Soft kicks out stains kimateki.
Through the
automated parking system, you can now pay for parking in 3 stress-free ways. Using M-Pesa through the USSD code *486*12#, or using cash at the CAPS payment points located in the parkings, or using your preloaded CAPS A card. No payment will be done at the exits.
We have come from far with you. I even gifted you a magnificent house. Rosa, it's the thought that counts. Please help me.
When it comes to fever, you need to be both. Panadol Baby and Infant starts to work on fever in 15 minutes and is gentle on the tummy. Panadol Baby and Infant, tough on fever, gentle on your child.
Protect yourself against coronavirus by using Amara antibacterial hand sanitizer that will effectively clean your hands and eliminate disease-causing virus while you're on the go.
NTV and PesaLink, the most efficient way to send money, have a message for you. We know you need to stay home and stay safe for yourself, the ones you love, and for Kenya. But that does not mean you can't work or do business. Use PesaLink for all your payment and banking needs from the safety of your phone or laptop. Stay safe, stay home. Business goes on with PesaLink.
Usingoje hadi dakika ya mwisho. Pimwa kwenye hospitali ya serikali. Matibabu inapatikana bila malipo. TB inakinga na tiba.
Working from home? No problem. Fiber Home has you covered with the fastest and most reliable internet speeds. Get connected today. Kazi lazima iendelee.
This is NTV.
Good afternoon, you're watching NTV at 1. My name is Olive Barrows. Now we start our bulletin with news of the priest, rather a follow-up by Zacchaeus Mwasame of the story we brought to you yesterday of the priest who traveled from Rome into the country and failed to self-quarantine, spent a night in Utawala before moving to his home in Siaya County, where it's alleged he presided over a mass and a burial on Saturday, that Saturday being the day after Kenya confirmed its first case of COVID-19. Zacchaeus Mwasame, what do you have for us?
Indeed, Olive, that is true. Father Richard Woodward presided over a mass in Kinda village during the burial of an elderly woman who had passed on, and hundreds of mourners attended that particular burial, and now it has turned out that he's positive. That has sent fears among the people who are there. And then one of them is a friend who comes from here in Kisumu. He's called Lawrence Okoth. He actually earlier on complained that one of his grandfathers and then also an uncle, grandmother, attended that particular burial, and he's worried that they could be exposed to the virus. He is now calling on the government to make sure that they are quarantined so that the virus cannot be exposed to many. Maybe if we can just have a glimpse of what Lawrence was saying earlier on, because we had a press brief with him earlier in the day. Here is what he had to say.
Kwa hii matanga yenye huu padri alikuwa, father, baba yangu alikuwa kwa hiyo matanga. nyanya yangu alikuwa kwa hiyo matanga na ukoo wetu walikuwa kwa hiyo matanga, kwa sababu huyo mama ya huyo mwenye alikuwa nazekwa alitoka huko kwetu. Sasa mimi nimekuja hapa, nilikuwa nataka hao watu waende wapimwe na waanze na baba yangu, kwa maana kwa WhatsApp nikiangalia napata kama baba yangu alikuwa karibu sana na huyu father, na yeye lazima akikuanga karibu na father, yeye lazima salimie father, kwa sababu ni mtu strong kwa Catholic, lazima asalimie father. Sasa nilikuwa nataka achukuliwe aende apimwe, kwa sababu yeye ni mtu hawezi wekwa kwa nyumba, hakuna mtu hawezi weka yeye kwa nyumba. Sasa kama hao wanaweza enda waende wachukue yeye, wapime yeye, waweke yeye mahali, wangoje waangalie kama anaweza kuwa amepata hii ugonjwa hata kama ako clean.
Yes, that was Lawrence Okoth, who is a concerned Kenyan. He said that he doesn't want those family members who are in that particular funeral to come back where he is until 14 days are over and they are sure that they are not infected with the virus. We are also informed that back in Ambira, the government agents led by Siaya County government are on high alert, making sure that people there adhere to the rules and stipulations that are there to make sure that the virus cannot continue spreading. That is sanitizing after every minute to make sure that they are not exposed to this particular virus. Back to you, Olive.
Right. Thank you, Zacchaeus Masame. He stays on that story. Yesterday, we heard from the Siaya County Commissioner, who says it will be difficult to trace all those who attended that particular burial in Siaya, and therefore called on them rather to report to the authorities, because tracing them could prove a challenge. That particular citizen has done just that. All right. We cross over to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where I believe Mel Miendo is standing by. One of the world's richest men, and that is Jack Ma from China, donated protective gear to the continent of Africa. Let's listen in to what Kenya's share is and how it will be distributed.
This will go a long way in protecting the health workers as they have suspected cases of COVID-19 disease and those who are in isolation facilities. So we want to thank the Jack Ma Foundation for this wonderful gift to the people of Kenya. And we want to thank our brothers from Ethiopia for agreeing to lift this donation to Kenya in a record time. I want to assure you again that we'll deploy this resource into immediate use to be able to help Kenyan people tackle the scourge of coronavirus disease. This afternoon further, the Cabinet Secretary will be addressing the media on the status of coronavirus disease in Kenya, and we'll be able to share further updates with you as we receive the information. We want to assure you further that all the health workers, the entire government is working as one, and the Kenyan people are behind us in one society approach towards handling this scourge. I want to thank you, members of the media, for the wonderful work that you are doing to be able to bring correct information to our people so that they can be able to make correct decisions. Our clarion call still remains prevention, prevention, prevention. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. If you can be able to get an alcohol-based sanitizer, use it frequently. Keep away from those who are having acute respiratory infection. Those who are sick should not leave home but stay at home, and instead call 719 and we'll be able to reach them. We need to have safe hygiene and safe food handling practices, and in case you are ill, please call 719 so that we can be able to assist you. I want to appeal for Kenyans again not to panic. Together we'll overcome this challenge, and together we must continue to soldier on. Thank you.
Yes, speed. For the public. Okay. Just a moment.
Well, that appears to have frozen, and it's rather difficult to tell who's speaking because of the face mask. But as I said, Mel Miendo is there, and she will be filing a report at the conclusion of that briefing. Now, there is no immediate way out of the wide effects that the coronavirus has imposed on various economies, and that's according to the Central Bank Governor, Dr. Patrick Njoroge. The governor has been speaking this morning while outlining the raft of measures that the banking regulator is taking to give the economy a shot in the arm owing to the coronavirus-induced slowdown. The CBK is also negotiating emergency assistance packages with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
We expect a fiscal package very soon, targeted and with involvement of the private sector and labor. It is important that that all three parties work together to put forward a strong and targeted fiscal package that will help push us or limit the damage and the cost of the coronavirus. We, as of from today, we will extend the tenure of our repos from 28 days all the way to 90 days. And that will allow banks, in case of liquidity need, they can bring in through this repurchase agreement, the repo, they can bring in their T-bills, and we can have a repo agreement for as much as 90 days.
Well, speaking of the impact of the coronavirus on the economy, Matatu and Border Operators Federation have vowed to down their tools on Thursday if the government will not cushion them from what they've termed as losses they're incurring due to the requirement to restrict the number of passengers they ferry. The operators want the government to scrap off the Matatu monthly fees and reduce their insurance charges.
Failure of which we will be compelled by situation to call on a lockdown of all PSV vehicles starting Thursday this week. We shall call all vehicles, all investors to park their cars and stay at home because it is not making any business sense.
Watoe hii riba ya kila mwezi ya matatu, watoe kama ni insurance. Now we are carrying 30 passengers from 51 seaters and 8 passengers kwa matatu ya 14 seater. Ukiangalia hata kama sasa kutoka Thika for example, matatu inabeba na shilingi 100 kuja Nairobi. Hiyo inakuja shilingi 800. Hiyo ni ya mafuta tu. Wapunguze hii taxes na watuondolee hii pesa ya kanjo, na kama ni insurance pia tuangaliwe, ndio tuweze kuhudumu wale wa Kenya ambao lazima waende kazi kwa sababu hakuna pesa.
If you'll recall, the Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe yesterday asked the Matatu operators not to take advantage of the situation by hiking their fares. We wait to see who between the two parties will prevail. Now, people who interacted with a French tourist from Kwale County who tested positive for the coronavirus have been identified in Savo, Taita Taveta County. The search for the others has been extended to Amboseli and Naivasha, where it's believed he visited before he was confirmed positive for COVID-19. Kevin Mutai has more on how the coast region is mitigating against the spread of the virus.
The Cabinet Secretary for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, on Monday announced that one of the COVID-19 patients from the coast region is still receiving treatment at a government isolation center. Health officials have now cast their nets wider in tracing all the people who came into contact with the patients. The French tourist is said to have visited different destinations, among them Amboseli, Savo, and even Naivasha. 16 people have been quarantined in Savo, as the search for other people in Kilifi, Mombasa, and Kwale continues.
All the patients, except one, who is at the coast, are still in stable condition and improving.
In Mombasa, the Emergency Committee on COVID-19 have introduced new measures to prevent the spread of the virus. The committee has directed that all barbershops and salons be closed immediately. Ferry commuters from today must have handkerchiefs or piece of cloth to cover their mouths. Those with flu-like symptoms have been banned from boarding the vessels. The committee also wants all public service vehicles be relocated from the channel to create more space for commuters. They also want all private hospitals in the county to set aside beds for COVID-19 patients. Some of these regulations extend to Kilifi County.
Tumeamua kwamba tutaweka askari wa kutosha hapa kuhakikisha kwamba hakuna mbio katika feri na kuhakikisha kwamba feri inabeba wale watu ambao hawatafinyana.
Tukiongea hayo yote, tufanye uamuzi ni kwamba afadhali tulie leo, tucheke kesho, kuliko kujifurahisha roho leo alafu tulie forever.
On Monday, the authorities arrested more than 10 teachers of the Little Flower Primary School in Mwembekuku area for allegedly conducting tuition. The school was closed and teachers locked up in police cells.
These are painful decisions, yes. But do we need to take them? Yes, of course. They could cost us, so be it. But we have a responsibility. Mimi, I've told you, don't listen to me if you don't want to. Don't. But I have told you.
Commuters at the ferry are, however, raising concerns over laxity of KFS management, citing that they have started experiencing shortage of water and lack of soap for hand hygiene. Kevin Mutai, NTV, Mombasa.
Now, although the government has put in place measures at reducing social interaction and enforcing social distancing, some flower farms in Naivasha town are openly defying the order, thus risking the lives of their employees. The farms have not complied to the 2/3 rule when ferrying their employees to work.
Why? Why? Tens of buses ferry thousands of workers to the flower farms in total ignorance of the directive from the government at a time when the world is crawling on its knees due to COVID-19.
Serikali ikipigana na huko juu, huku chini, yale mambo yanafanyika katika chini hapa Naivasha ni mabaya zaidi. Ati kwa sababu ni maua. Hii maua kweli inaweza kuwa uhai.
The safety is now in limbo as they come into contact with other workers when checking in at work. Drivers too are not happy about packed buses of workers to and from work.
Nilikuwa nimewaambia hawa kutoka kesho sitabeba hivyo. Sasa wapelekana kama hawalipi hiyo matripu, sasa wajua vile watajipanga.
Sijapokulai. Lakini sasa sisi tulifanya hesabu ya 60%.
We have not been told specifically this bus should carry how many people. Therefore, he has told us it is less than 40. If you tell me it's a minimum of 20, we will be carrying 20. So that they anasimama hapa anahesabu. Mimi kazi yangu imejaa mdoka.
Kweli serikali iwezi ingilia kati. Tuone vile inawezafanyika. Kumekuwa watu kunyanyaswa zaidi na sasa imeenda zaidi kwa sababu this our last minute inaonekana ambaye tunaweza umia zaidi.
The flower industry has been affected adversely since the wake of the virus, with farms forced to lay off workers due to cancellation of orders and restrictions from Europe, which is a major market. Ruth Sarmoi, NTV.
Staying with the theme of transportation, when we come back from this break, we'll tell you about the e-payment service for matatus.
Working from home? No problem. Fiber Home has you covered with the fastest and most reliable internet speeds. Get connected today. Kazi lazima iendelee.
I help women find independence by training them in fish farming. It's tough on my back, joints, and can cause headaches. Panadol Extra relieves multiple types of pain. Panadol Extra, now with new Optizorb technology to fight multiple tough pains with 3 times more pain-relieving medicine in the first 30 minutes when you need it most. Seeing them support themselves makes any pain worth it.
If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
Rashes again? Kiss Kids diapers. Kiss Kids, no rashes. Kiss Kids, no rashes. Bye-bye rashes. Buy diapers. Choose Kiss Kids.
Welcome back. You're watching NTV at 1. My name is Olive Barrows. Now, mobile service provider Safaricom has rolled out a partnership with public transport sector players to accept cashless payments through M-Pesa in the ongoing battle to combat the spread of the coronavirus. The partnership will see crew from partnering public transport operators begin accepting fares through their phone numbers. The service has already been deployed to more than 300 City Star shuttle vehicles in Nairobi and will be rolled out to additional players in the coming days, helping them further comply with the government's recommendations to combat the spread of COVID-19. Passengers paying their fares through the service will follow the standard procedure when sending money to another person, keying the number provided by the crew. Safaricom had previously announced all its M-Pesa customers can send money for free for transactions of 1,000 shillings and below for a 90-day period.
They can move that money to the owners, they can pay for fuel, they can remit money to circles. And as you see, we've developed special posters for them that shows the customers how to make payments. And the journey is quite simple for customers to use. We've checked a couple of buses. Customers really embrace this.
Natumai serikali pia inafaa kuja na nguvu moja kusema matatu zote Kenya mzima inafaa kuwa cashless system kabla hii wiki kuisha.
As calls for frequent hand washing to curb the spread of COVID-19 grow louder, people's ability to access water and soap as well as sanitizers is key. However, in some villages, the residents are fearful as they cannot afford soap, so water is all they have. NTV's Zacchaeus Mosame reports on what could be a snippet of what many Kenyans in rural areas and informal settlements are grappling with amid the coronavirus crisis.
Hand washing may be a usual practice to some, especially those in urban areas. However, not so for families living in villages and rural areas. Residents of Kamkunda village in Bungoma County's Kandui constituency are worried. They say they can hardly afford soap to stay hygienic and keep COVID-19 at bay.
Nilisikia wakitangaza ugonjwa wa corona. Nimeshituka na hiyo ugonjwa na wanasema inafaa unawe na sabuni yenyewe hatuna pesa ya kununua sabuni. Hatuna mahali pa kujishikilia tupate hiyo sabuni. Wamekataza sokoni, hakuna kufanya biashara.
Hiyo sabuni ama sanitizer yenye wanasema kuipata ni vigumu. Sisi wengi maisha yetu ni kutoka ndio tukule ama ndio tupate riziki.
As they seek to stay afloat in the turbulent waters of sanitation and economy, some of the residents are decrying the closure of markets.
Na nawa tu hivyo na maji bure, sabuni hakuna. Sasa tulikuwa tunaomba serikali tusaidie kwa sababu tunaona kama tunaangamia. Hatuna mbele wala nyuma. Sasa tumebaki tu hapa.
Niko na watoto hapa zaidi ya 10. Na sina namna mbele wala nyuma. Soko hatuendi, kwa duka hatuendi, kazi yoyote hatufanyi, tuko nyumba na watoto. Sasa watoto sijui nawapea kitu gani. Asubuhi wanataka chakula, saa 7 chakula, jioni chakula, na sina mbele wala nyuma.
Maisha vijijini ni magumu. Tuna watoto ambao wanachafuka mara kwa mara, wanatakana wanawie sabuni. Ikiwa kidogo inakwisha tu hata kwa siku moja. Kesho yake natakana ingine. Lakini kuipata kwa vijiji ni vigumu.
Leaders are calling on the national government to supply sanitizers to families in rural areas and informal settlements.
We are going to put into considerations the issues of certain families that are unable to even buy soap. We are looking at a situation where chiefs are going to distribute soaps into every home.
The situation here in Kamkunda village, Kandui constituency, paints a picture of thousands of Kenyans putting up in rural areas and who cannot afford to get a piece of soap for sanitization. That puts their lives in danger at this era of coronavirus. Zacchaeus Masame, NTV, Bungoma.
Staying with matters water and soap, this time water. Every 22nd day of March, the world gathers to celebrate International Water Day, holding events in each country. But this year, the World Water Day celebrations were cancelled everywhere due to the COVID-19 fears. Kenya's official celebrations were to be held in Wajir County, a region that has struggled to provide clean water to its residents. But now with the threat of COVID-19 becoming real, the county is hastening the provision of water kiosks so that the locals have access to running water. Nurdin Elmoge reports.
Mama Halima Ali and her neighbors are overwhelmed as they take turns to fetch water from the running taps for the first time in 30 years.
Tulikuwa tumekosa maji maka mingi. Alhamdulillah sasa na tumepata maji. Na tuko kwetu. Zamani tulikuwa tunaenda kutafuta buko mbali kabisa. Kwa mtungi tulikuwa tunanunua na 100 na sasa tumepata maji alhamdulillah.
The residents of this small town have now clean water to drink and wash their hands, a first line of defense against the coronavirus.
I used to fetch water to drink initially from the water pan. Now I do not go there since I have tapped water at my door.
The World Water Day celebration set to be held here on Sunday was cancelled over concern of spread of COVID-19.
Today is World Water Day. Na tunasherehekea kama wakazi wa Lagbol. Kwa vile zamani hatukuwa na hii fursa, lakini leo tuko na fursa na tunafurahia vile munaona.
There are 5 similar water kiosks in different parts of this small town, some 60 kilometers south of Wajir.
Lagbol location, the county government have done a project. We have done water piping from somewhere which is 14 kilometers from town, and now we can comfortably say water is in Lagbol town, which is one of the most hardest place to crack, and it has been having a very high salinity water. Right now they are having a fresh water. The water is just in town.
The county still remains on high alert of a possible spread of COVID-19 and is encouraging locals to wash their hands frequently. Nurdin Almoge, NTV, Wajir County.
It took 2 months to reach 100,000 coronavirus cases and just 2 weeks to get to 200,000. It only took 4 days for the tally to reach 300,000, a clear sign that the pandemic is accelerating, and that is according to the World Health Organization. The Director General, Tedros Adhanom, says it's heartbreaking that the disease is present in almost every country in the world right now. Their remarks come as the number of deaths soared past 15,000, with more than 341,000 people infected worldwide.
The pandemic is accelerating. It took 67 days from the first reported case to reach the first 100,000 cases. Small observational and non-randomized studies will not give us the answers we need. Using untested medicines without the right evidence could raise false hope and even do more harm than good.
People in the early stages of disease may lose the sense of smell, may lose the sense of taste. But this is something that we need to look into to really capture if this is one of the early signs and symptoms of COVID-19. We have a number of countries that are conducting early investigations.
We have to be strong. We have to follow the guidance of the WHO.
South Africa has announced a 3-week lockdown with soldiers patrolling the streets to ensure compliance in order to contain the spread of the coronavirus. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the move is a measure to save millions of South Africans from infection. Senegal has also declared a nationwide state of emergency, imposing curfews and travel restrictions to curb the spread of the virus.
The next few days are crucial. Without decisive action, the number of people infected will rapidly increase from a few hundred to tens of thousands, and within a few weeks to hundreds of thousands. The nationwide lockdown is necessary to fundamentally disrupt the chain of transmission across society. I have accordingly directed the South African National Defence Force to be deployed to support the South African Police Service in ensuring that the measures we are announcing are implemented. Fellow South Africans, our country finds itself confronted not only by a virus that has infected more than 250,000 people across the globe, but also by the prospects of a very deep economic recession that will cause businesses to close and many of our people to lose their jobs. The banking system will remain open, the JSE will continue to function, the national payment system will continue to operate, and the Reserve Bank and the commercial banks will ensure that the banknotes and coins remain available.
Time to look at what's happening in the world of sports, and the World Football Governing Body, FIFA, is expected to give its way forward this week after the FKF election was nullified for the second time by the Sports Disputes Tribunal. Additionally, the repeat of the county and national elections may delay further depending on the resolution of the global coronavirus pandemic.
Jono Haga na kuwasaidia na kuendelea kuwasaidia na haya mambo. Ukijua vizuri tumetumia pesa nyingi sana kwa shirikisho. Ukijua vizuri tumefuata uamuzi wako wa Disemba vile ulisema. Lakini bado sasa turudie kura mara ya 3. Ndio wanasema. Tangoja FIFA. Hatujui FIFA watasema nini. Natarajia leo ama kesho asubuhi tutapata barua. Basi tutaletea Wakenya vile FIFA watakavyosema. Sisi Joshua tutafuata. Lakini tunaweza kuambia ni kwamba mambo ya kura za football, sisi tuna chama kwa county 47, chama iko na support ya vilabu na wana football kwa sababu ya yale mambo wameona tumefanya. Corona itaisha, haya mambo yataisha. Kuna kitu moja nzuri lakini wamefanya, wameniongezea muda kwa ofisi.
International Olympic Committee member Dick Pound says that the 2020 Olympic Games will be postponed until 2021 because of the global coronavirus pandemic. The IOC has given itself 4 weeks to decide on the future of this summer's games, but veteran IOC member Pound says a decision will be announced soon, but in stages. This adds to the uncertainty regarding the games, with the chairman of the British Olympic Association saying it is unlikely that Great Britain would send a team to Tokyo. Australia and Canada have already said that they will not compete in Japan. The decision to cancel or postpone the games has huge financial implications, with neither Japan nor IOC willing to bear responsibility.
President of the Tokyo 2020 Organising Committee and the Hellenic Olympic Committee President, IOC member.
This season's Champions League final, Europa League final, and Women's Champions League final, all due to be played in May, have been formally postponed because of the coronavirus pandemic. According to the European Football Governing Body, UEFA, no decision has been taken on rearranged dates. All 3 competitions are currently suspended, along with almost every European domestic league, because of the coronavirus. 12 teams remain in this season's Champions League after only half of the competition's round of 16 ties could be completed before UEFA postponed the remaining matches due to the virus outbreak. UEFA last week postponed the Euro 2020 tournament until next year. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced a complete lockdown of the United Kingdom, banning people from leaving their homes as the government scrambles to enforce social distancing measures to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. All non-essential shops will close with immediate effect. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has urged all Britons who are on holiday abroad to change their plans and come home while it's still possible. The UK has 6,650 confirmed cases. A further 54 deaths were announced in the past 24 hours, bringing the nation's total to 335.
Because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. That is why people will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes. Shopping for basic necessities as infrequently as possible. One form of exercise a day. For example, a run, walk or cycle, alone or with members of your household. Any medical need to provide care or to help a vulnerable person. And travelling to and from work, but only where this is absolutely necessary and cannot be done from home. That's all. These are the only reasons you should leave your home. You should not be meeting friends.
Johnson applying the literal meaning of three is a crowd. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he will soon call for the opening country up for business. That's what he said. After long periods of restrictive measures to contain the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump also says that anti-malarial drugs that are under investigation to treat the new coronavirus could be a gift from God, despite scientists warning against the dangers of overhyping and proven medicines.
We don't know, but there's a real chance that it could have a tremendous impact. It would be a gift from God if that worked. It would be a big game changer. So we'll see. But distribution starts tomorrow morning early in New York, and I think a lot of people are going to be, hopefully they're going to be very happy with the result, but we're all going to be watching closely. It's going to, obviously the numbers are going to increase with time, and then they're going to start to decrease. And we're going to be opening our country up for business because our country was meant to be open and working with others, but especially for our workers. Together we will care for our fellow citizens and we will win this war, and we'll win it much sooner than people think. And we'll be back in business as a country pretty soon. You'll be hearing about that also pretty soon.
China's central Hubei province, where coronavirus first emerged late last year, is to lift travel curbs after 2 months under lockdown. Hubei province authorities say they will now allow transportation to resume for the city of Wuhan on April the 8th, effectively lifting a mass quarantine over the city. People in Wuhan will be allowed to leave the city and Hubei province. The easing of restrictions comes as Hubei reported that new infections dropped to 0 on March the 19th, a dramatic plunge from the height of an epidemic that's infected more than 80,000 Chinese and killed over 3,200. Even as Hubei's numbers have dwindled to single digits, China is facing another concern as imported cases continue to add to the country's tally of infections. China's economy has been hammered by the outbreak and the aggressive containment measures. And that concludes NTV at 1. My name is Olive Burrows. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.